Hey there, beautiful souls. I'm Colleen Lockoff.
And I'm Meredith Lockoff.
And welcome to Spiritual Sisters with Sass, the podcast where two sisters with a passion for spirituality and a touch of sass come together to explore the exciting world of self-improvement.
That's right, Colleen. We embarked on this incredible journey together, diving into different self-improvement techniques, yoga practices, and a whole array of life experiences.
Yeah, and through it all, we've managed to create lives that are abundant, happy, and constantly evolving. It's been a wild ride, hasn't it, Meredith?
You bet, sis. We've got two very different perspectives on life, but that's what makes this podcast so special. I'm all about diving in head first into life's adventures and embracing every challenge with a bit of sass. While Colleen here, she's got her own unique approach.
Yep, that's me. And I'm all about the yoga, mindfulness, and finding my zen. And together we make the perfect balance.
So whether you're looking for some wisdom, a few laughs, or just some heartfelt stories, you're in the right place. We're here to share our personal experiences and insights with you, all while exploring the wild and diverse world of self-improvement.
So grab your headphones and get ready for a fantastic journey with us. Spiritual Sisters with Sass is here to uplift, inspire, and keep it real.
Thanks for tuning in, lovely listeners. Let's dive in.
Spirit and sass. Here we go. All right, everyone, welcome again to Spiritual Sisters with Sass. Today we have a special guest, Lisa Sugarman. Super excited to have you here. This goes really close to my heart. We're talking about mental health today. So I like personally seem to be, I don't even know, a magnet. I really have been a caretaker my entire life. And my current partner is has bipolar. And it just seems to be something that reoccurs in my life. And my sister and I both have an uncle that took his own life when we were quite young. So it's been really important for me to talk about, and about how not being okay is okay. And that it's better to talk about it than not. And so what better guest to have than someone who has done such like pioneer work in the mental health world or mental illness world. I don't know which way to go or call it, but I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to ask you a little bit. Could you please just tell us a little bit about what I'm rambling about? Who are you?
Well, tell us about yourself first,
Yes.
and then tell us about what you do and how you ended up here.
Yeah. Who am I? Well, my name's Lisa Sugarman. I am sitting here in my office just north of Boston. I live here with my husband. One of my kids is 4 miles down the road, and my other one is about 7,000 miles away in Japan. So I'm the mom of 2 daughters, and this has been pretty much home. Not north of Boston has pretty much been home for me my whole life. And my husband is from my rival town, so we're kind of in the thick of where we've always spent our life. And what I do in the world now in the last few years is very, very different from what I had done in the world prior to a few years ago. So I've always been a content creator. That hasn't changed at all. I've been a writer. I've been a columnist. I've written a bunch of parenting books. I was in that parenting space. Like when my kids were little, I was in that space pretty deeply on all the parenting platforms, just really talking a lot about maintaining work-life balance, things like that, and talking about parenting from the perspective of not trying to get it all right, not trying to be that perfect parent, like embracing your perfectly imperfectness. That was kind of my lane that I've been in for a really long time. And what shifted that for me into this mental health space, which is where I've been now for a number of years, was a very unexpected revelation about my own life. So I'm a 3-time survivor of suicide loss. And that loss started for me when I was 9 years old. The cousin of mine who lived, a mile up the street he was 18, I was 9 at the time. He took his life. So that was not only my first experience with losing anybody in my family, but it was also my first experience with suicide in general and understanding what that was to a point, to the 9-year-old brain. And then flash forward a year, I lost my own father, who at the time was 45. I was 10 years old. I'm an only child. It was extremely sudden, very unexpected. The narrative that I was given was that he had died of a heart attack. My dad was a big, big smoker. There was heart disease in his family. The dots were pretty easy to connect. Nothing I ever had the need to question. Kind of moved into the rest of my life, believing that my father had died of a heart attack. And then about 11 years ago, I found out completely by accident that my dad had actually taken his own life. So I've lost him twice. And in the course of those 11 years, I found out that truth about my father. We lost a very dear friend of ours. We grew up together. We were in each other's weddings and lived together out of college. And he took his own life 4 years ago this week, actually. So all of those losses really just, those specific kinds of losses really just shut me down and got me to a place of really kind of having to dig deep into how I could even move forward in my life and how I could move forward with the work I was doing. And it really just created this total mind shift for me. I didn't feel like the work I was doing anymore was authentic to the space I needed to be in, was aligned anymore with the space I needed to be in. So I kind of took a big, big step back for a little while until I started talking about those losses in public. Once I did that, I just kind of unintentionally, very unexpectedly found myself on a very new path. I found myself talking openly about those losses and about suicide in general, and realizing just how deeply stigmatized suicide and mental illness is in general in the world. And it just lit a fire, I think is the easiest way to say it. It just lit a fire. And I not only just wanted to talk about it every chance I got, I wanted to write about it because that's my sweet spot. That's what I've always done. So little by little, I started with the talking about it, and the talking about it became more than casual conversations. It became speaking about it, and it became writing about it. And little by little, everything just shifted to this role of being an advocate. So I work with a lot of organizations. I'm a crisis counselor with the Trevor Project. If you know about the Trevor Project, they are the largest LGBTQ focused crisis and suicide support hotline in the world for at-risk youth ages 13 to 24. I've been on their lifelines for almost 3 years. Work with the National Alliance on Mental Illness as a storyteller. Do a lot of work with Samaritans. I moderate grief groups for survivors of suicide loss. And I just recently, we were chatting about this before we went live, that I just started a new podcast of my own called The Survivors, with a good friend who is a survivor of an attempt, and I'm a multiple survivor of loss. So together we have this very cool interaction around suicide and kind of elevating that to the mainstream, bringing that out into a place where people can have those honest conversations. So there's no one easy way to explain what I do and who I am, but that is the best narrative that I can give you of how I got from there to where I am now.
So can you tell us what the Help Hub is?
I would love to tell you what the Help Hub is. So again, we were talking about this a little bit ago. The Help Hub was really just born out of this need I had to ensure that people had the resources that they needed when they need them most. And anyone who understands anything about mental illness understands that when you're in that headspace, when you're in that dark or hopeless or critical space where you can't think clearly and your actions are being driven by something other than logic, you just need help. And you often don't know where to go. Like if you're in a toxic headspace, the last thing in the world that you know how to do is search around, seek out resources that are appropriate. You need the help that you need right then and there in that moment. So it became really important to me, as someone who spends a ton of time on crisis lifelines, listening to people who are in crisis, to build a place, to create a platform where people could come and talk openly about suicide, could find the resources that they need, get the support that they need, seek out the content that might be helpful for them. So I just created it. It's like, that old, if you build it, they will come. Hopefully that was the intention, because I wasn't finding anything like that
Right.
out in the world. I was giving people tons and tons of resources, and a lot of them they're wonderful resources, all of these big organizations, but they weren't specific to everyone's needs. And your needs might be different than my needs based on where we come from in the world, whether we're part of the BIPOC community or the queer community or the Latinx community or the elderly community. Like, everybody needs a little something different, even though we all deal with so many of the same issues.
Mhm.
So I just kind of broke this list that I had been accumulating apart and tried to find a way to showcase everything in a way that would make it easy for people who needed resources to just find what they need when they need it. And that was kind of the origin of the Help Hub. I had all this content that I had created and videos that I had created, articles that I'd written, and of course, this incredibly long list of organizations that had like no structure at all. So I broke them into these communities and these groups. And so now the Help Hub is a place where it doesn't matter where you're coming from or what you need, you can most often find what you're looking for by going to the Help Hub.
I love what you are doing. This brings up two different lines of thought for me. I'd like to just like introduce them and then hear what you have to say regarding that. Number one is the thought of like being in healthcare and the stereotype that is around it. So I was a nurse for about 17 years, most of those years in the emergency room. And so that's a very like place of psychoses. Often when there is mental illness and people are not necessarily taking care of themselves appropriately, diet, exercise, sleep, medication, etc. Often in certain types of mental illness, people will come to something called psychoses. Unfortunately, the word is thrown around like someone's psychotic, but like literally, that is just when there's a difficulty between reality and where someone is headed. And so that's like it's a crisis. So people often come into emerge in crisis, both physical and emotional, mental. And so I know that there are jokes because there will be attempted suicide where people will come in and then nurses have jokes about like writing a book on how to do it properly. And that was brought up a lot. And I think that the entire medical system is completely broken and that anyone within it is burnt out. Not anyone, not everyone, but most people. They're burnt out. And what I recognize is I'm here to help people, but I'm also burnt out and I pretty much hate everybody. So I also will say that like I've been a part of that stereotype of mental illness and not treating people with full respect, and have spent years like undoing that, thanks to yoga, to be honest, and quitting the medical field and coming to a place of yoga and teaching with all the experience. So the stereotype is full on real, just where you go to get help, which is really messed up. So that's the one line of thinking I'd love to chat about. And then the other piece is I've just had a friend that she's a friend, not best friend, more than an acquaintance that was in the yoga medicine world. So, medicines like ayahuasca, mushrooms, those kind of things. And she was a facilitator that guided you through these spiritual journeys. And we took a teacher training together, and she talked lots about the fact that she was very suicidal during SAD season, which is seasonal affective
Depression.
disorder that a lot of us have when we live in climates like my sister lives, where we have winter, and you as well, right? Winter, lots of sun, lots of rain, lots of cloud, and then the opposite, which is like too hot and no clouds. And she was very intentional with her suicide. She made sure to call every single person that was really important to her, not to tell them what was going on, but to tell them how much she loved them. She wrote over 38, I think, letters to people within her realm or her circle. told her roommates she was going, I forget, to visit somebody, and then actually drove somewhere in her car that would be found by a snowplow, and then took pills and like expired there, so that she had touch point with everybody. And her letters said, please respect my decision. It's been a decision of many years, and I feel that I'm complete with my suffering in this lifetime. So there's also this, my partner struggles with suicidal ideation, especially in the downs. And we've had a conversation that, like, please at least don't just like disappear and kill yourself. I'm just gonna be straight out because this is what we talk about and it's a reality. Please just
Yeah,
don't
I'm
disappear.
glad you're being this
Thank you.
direct because we
Thank
need
you.
to be. Like,
Okay.
that's the whole point.
Thank you. So I've just said, please just don't go and kill yourself, because I've also experienced that here with a person in the expat community that literally just like went and hung himself on the beach, and that was it. And everybody was in shock, his family included. Can we at least have a conversation? I will respect you and your process and would love to like be there for you if this is a decision that when you're not in a down, that you continue to uphold, because they are pretty like, it can be very like, I can't do this anymore, and then, oh, I love life and I let's not.
Well, that's the nature of bipolar disorder.
Right.
You know, there's that mania that's factored into everything. So it's this giant ebb and flow. And it's not just like a, your typical ebb and flow. It's That's why they call it mania.
Yeah. So there's two ways to go, because I see both sides. Like I see this, like, I mean, what we were told in Emerge is that the highest stats are in older men because they have access to guns and they're at the end of their life. So this is where we would experience a lot of people that had actually like expired and trying to bring them back to life, as opposed to younger people with attempts.
Can we also address that there's like the third side of it, which is the assisted suicide?
Fair. That is legal in
Um,
Canada.
It is in certain like circumstances or whatever. I've heard, now I don't know enough about it, but I do have a friend who has ALS and she's getting very close to that point. Um, Basically, she has nothing. She has her voice and breathing, and even her breathing is challenged. And so, like Lynn was just saying, in her experience with her spouse, if her spouse said in his mania, like in his positives, he'd be like, I don't want to be here, yada yada yada, that she could then essentially be there with him. Because I've also spoken to quite a few people who have had MAID, is what it's called in Canada. I have spoken to a few people who they said, like this one lady I did taxes for, she sat down with me and said it was the most beautiful experience because he knew he was dying and he knew he was just going to continue to suffer. He got to make the choice. The whole family got together. They all got to, say their goodbyes, love him, and then watch him. And they got to watch this peaceful passing of this man with a smile on his face. And so when she sat down, I think this is actually, I'm getting goosebumps. I think this is probably because in my one of my businesses, in my bookkeeping business, we do income tax. I've been doing some of these people's income tax for 20 plus years. And now I've got some of these couples that are coming in and they're no longer couples. The husband comes in and the wife has passed away, or the wife has passed away, or the wife comes in, the husband's passed away, and most of them are incredibly teary-eyed, and you can see the pain they're in, and 75 years of marriage and all of these things. And then this lady comes in and is like, it was the most beautiful thing ever. When she remembers it, you could see in her face, it wasn't like, it was grief tears, but it wasn't the same type of grief. Like it was, he's at peace and I know he's at peace. And like that part for her, and just seeing the difference in her reaction versus somebody who's died unexpectedly, naturally, long-term trouble, that type of thing. So I find that these things also shift because my friend with ALS invited me to be there for her suicide. She hasn't picked a date or anything like that, but she did originally ask me and was like, well, you guys can do my makeup and we'll just have a day of fun and laughter. And I'll pick it in the afternoon for me to pass. And then I want you guys to go celebrate. And I was like, okay, I like the idea of this because it's conscious. It's very decided and it's a longer term thing and all of the things. So for me, I do believe in what Lynn's saying. If someone here in the world is so depressed that life feels like it's not worth doing, like from what I've heard, if you go, and Lynn, you can tell me if I'm wrong on this one, but like if you show up in the hospital and attempted suicide, are you not then forced to be put somewhere that you have to then deal with your mental health?
You're sectioned,
Yeah.
right, Lynn?
Yeah.
You're sectioned.
And see,
Mhm.
that part for me isn't okay. It's also against the law to kill
'Cause it's
yourself.
illegal. Yeah.
How does
In
that
some
make sense? 'Cause
places.
you are not choosing my choices, period. So for me, this it being against the law, it not being my own choice, that part is frustrating for me because I also see a lot of people in the work that we do, we're coaches. In a lot of the work that we do, some of these people have been through some things that they do not want to heal from, and it should be their choice. Now, that being said, there's also the piece of that when you commit suicide, Lynn's friend did it in this beautiful way where she communicated with everyone, didn't tell them what she was doing, but communicated enough that, when she's gone, they still have that, wow, she called and said, I love you, and told me that this is the way she felt she would be peace. Like, so seeing that, do you see a lot of that in the industry and in your sector? Because these are very different things, like assisted suicide, conscious suicide, and just painful suicide.
Yeah, I mean, I do definitely see all of those. There's an array of that I see. And I have my own very personal beliefs on assisted suicide. And I have a feeling that they align with you all and what you're saying. I mean, I really believe, as someone who's been trained now just by virtue of being on Crisis Lifelines,
Yeah.
I've been trained to focus on the agency of this person who I'm talking to on the phone, maintaining that person's agency, no matter what. First of all, taking someone at face value. And you know that a lot of these phone calls that we get, people are in a heightened state. They're super dysregulated.
Yeah.
They're possibly, I've had so many calls that have been in process suicide attempts, or someone's timeline is, within the next 24 hours, I'm planning to do XYZ.
Yeah.
And so people's, you know, headspace is completely dysregulated. In that case, if someone goes to the hospital and they're in that place, I understand and can respect the intention of getting someone evaluated.
Yeah.
and making certain that the person is behaving the way that they're behaving consciously. Like,
Yeah.
do you know what I'm saying? Am I
Yes.
saying that the right
Yes.
way? That,
Yeah.
in other words, that, like you say, you talk about your friends or your partner when they're in a down, or depends on how you look at it. If they're
Right.
down, meaning if they're calm, if
Yeah.
they're of sound mind, and if they're thinking clearly, and they're not in the middle of an episode, and there's no mania,
Right.
then you want to be able to honor that.
Yeah.
I believe in that. I deeply believe in a person's ability to have agency over their own life.
Yeah.
When they're of sound mind like that.
Yes.
And I do think, unfortunately, the fact of the matter is, it's like, if somebody wants to do this, they're going to do it. No matter what you or I say, or any of us says, or any healthcare professional or family member, or whatever this person has in their brain that is telling them that they're finished or they just can't continue, they're going to find a way to do the thing regardless. And I think if that person has communicated, like your friend did, communicated, look, I know what I'm doing. I know how I've lived. I know how I'm suffering. Only I know what lies ahead for me, and how, like your friend with ALS, like how limiting that's going to be. You can't possibly understand. None of us can possibly understand what that does to your heart or your brain or your relationships or your capacity to live a joyful life. If there is such an incredible barrier between you and being able to live at least somewhat of a joyful life, I believe that you have the right. Like, we're in control, or should be in control, of our own bodies, our own decisions. And look, the bottom line for all of it is that, regardless of what the circumstances are, like whether it's your friend with ALS or your friend who made all of her arrangements, the very bottom line is that these people aren't trying to get away from us. They're not trying to avoid living. They're trying to get away from the pain that they're in.
Right.
Sometimes it's physical pain, sometimes it's emotional pain. And I think every single one of us has the right, reserves that right to make that decision that serves us best. And obviously, there are, a million different ways that someone can go about doing that. And some go about it more sensitively than others.
Yeah.
But it's, there's so much more to it that people just don't understand. It's not just an issue of people think suicide. Well, there's that whole selfish belief system.
Yep.
I was a complete victim of that for so many years of my life, for probably 2/3 of my life. I was just someone who believed that. It was not something that I was taught.
Right.
It was just something that developed in my own little brain, probably when I was little and really didn't fully understand suicide and mental illness. And it was a time in the world when people weren't talking about it. So there was no one educating anyone about it. And until I found out my own father died by suicide, I absolutely was in that camp, very firmly in that camp of, well, why didn't you reach out? Why couldn't someone, look for a way to help themselves? It seemed so simple to me. And then now, as a byproduct of doing all the work that I do and being in the communities that I'm in, I know how untrue all that is. Like, I know at this point now, it's beyond someone's control who is at that point. And it really is a matter of living without pain. They're not thinking about who they're impacting. They're not thinking about what they're leaving. They're thinking about the pain. So I hope that in some way answered some of the questions, or at least touched on some of those points.
I feel like I also, my best friend coaches this lady, and super sad. They were both at one point drug addicts, heroin addicts. The two were living together in another city. They had been texting, and she said, I'll be home in half an hour. We'll get our stuff organized so we can go to the gym in the morning, all the things. And then she texted her and said, oh, I'm going to be a bit late. She didn't respond, all these things. She got home and found her best friend OD'd on heroin, face down. And no, she had no idea. It has now, over the last week or so, unraveled that in fact she messaged one of her friends, and her friend said, oh my God, I found heroin in my purse. And she's like, I had to throw it down the toilet because all these people are a group of getting clean. And she's like, I had to throw it down the toilet. And the best friend had actually made a comment, oh, that would have been an easy death. And less than a week later, they found her OD'd on heroin. So it seems like it was her choice to do this. And she's been struggling with her mental health since she was a child, which this is where a lot of I see in mine, because I deal with addiction, I see a lot of these people that their choice was either death or drugs. Drugs at least gave them temporary relief. They're not feeling all the pain that they felt before. They can still get through this life, even though the life they're choosing is hard. So then there's the ones that have chosen that, like, the drugs and street living and all of those things don't work for them. So it's just easier this way. And I feel like this suicide is such a great place for us to look at how we make everything about ourselves.
That's a great way of saying it. You're right. We do
literally make everything about ourselves. I even found this when my friend with ALS was misdiagnosed with MS at one point. And at the same time, within a week, one of my best friends of 14 years was diagnosed with stomach cancer. Yeah. And it was such an interesting thing to watch both of these people, because the girl with ALS was misdiagnosed, and she just had this okay, so this is what I'm heading into. Life is going to be really hard, but I wasn't given a death sentence. My girlfriend who had cancer literally came to me and said, so I guess I've been given a death sentence because you can't live without a stomach. And I was just like, holy crap. But then watching the people in their lives. So in that moment, she told me, I just got diagnosed with stomach cancer and I have maybe a year to live. And I just kind of sat there and was like, holy shit, this is wow. What a diagnosis. To watch the people that came into her life make it about them. She told her daughter while I was sitting with her, and her daughter said, oh my God, I'm so sad. Oh my God, you're leaving me. It was all about me, and how your diagnosis is about me. And I literally took a minute and sat there and just listened to the daughter. And then I was like, hey, can we talk for a second? Because I've known the daughter for years and years. So I went outside and I was like, do you realize you just made this all about you? And she's like, excuse me, and was pissed. Because obviously her mom's dying and all the things. But I said, like, you just went in there and said, oh my God, you're leaving me. This is about me, 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 me. What about your mom, dude? She's the one who just got diagnosed with cancer. She's the one fighting for her life, not you. So the way you
Good
feel
for
about the
you.
situation
Good for
doesn't apply.
you for calling it out. And I'm sure she needed to hear that. But I think that's just, it's human nature, right? That people are unfortunately more self-centered than we are anything else. And that's a really sad reality about the majority of people, not all people, but a lot of us tend to lead with, well, how does that affect me? How does that affect my life? How does that affect my world? How does that affect my day to day? And it's unfortunate. And you saw it firsthand. How did your friend
Unfortunate,
react?
but it's also okay because the way that like there's such a fine line with this whole, selfish thing because Lynn and I have talked about this a lot because I'm going to put me first no matter what because there is no one else in this world that is putting me first. No one else in this world cares about my feelings the way that I care about my feelings. Just like I don't care about your feelings the way you care about your feelings. Like it's a very normal experience. But where do you go? Do you people please? Because that makes you feel like crap as well. Or
Mm-hmm.
do you do you and like finding the balance as well as understanding that like human nature is selfish, but also learning to consider other people within
Well,
that.
I want to jump in there really quickly because you are correct in people pleasing is a very selfish thing. But let me jump in there because I see this a lot in the rooms. I'm an addict for sure, like of many, many things. And I go to AA and NA, not as much right now as I did. But one of the things that's always been hard for me to connect to is the teachings of NA and AA because addicts can be incredibly selfish and manipulate others for their own betterment. And so when these teachings come up, I have difficulty connecting to them because while people pleasing comes from a selfish place of self-preservation, my own feelings are never put first. Everybody else's are.
Yes.
So a lot of people pleasers will not actually commit suicide because they're more concerned about how everybody else is going to feel about this situation than someone from the opposite place of still being selfish that just wants the suffering to end.
That's a good
Right?
point.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally touche on all of that.
Yeah,
I agree.
that's a really, really good point.
Mm-hmm.
It's just
Super valid.
yeah,
And it's so true because it's like understanding that we all also have these pieces of people pleasing in us because like Lynn going through this experience of learning to not people please and not let everyone walk all over her, whereas I'm kind of because of her, I'm kind of on the opposite side where I'm like, well, don't like me, don't fucking look. I don't care. Like, go away then. So we're on opposite extremes, but then we're having this conversation, and all of a sudden I'm like, holy shit, that's my people pleasing. I didn't know my people pleased at all. But in that conversation, that's kind of where we ended up, where she's like, okay, so what is that right now? I was like, ew, I have people pleasing moments.
Yeah, you're
Okay.
human. That's what that boils
Yes.
down to. You're just
Again, all of these things
you're a human
human.
being and we're fallible and
Yeah.
we fall into these moments and categories and thought loops without sometimes realizing we're there.
Yeah.
And that's a hard thing. There's a whole self-awareness piece that always has to be turned on.
Yeah.
Right.
And sometimes it's not. Sometimes it lapses and sometimes we do the thing that we work so hard not to do
Yeah.
because we're human, but that's okay. That is okay. It has to be okay.
It does, because that's part of the human experience that our
Right.
spirit is here to do. So to experience the experiences of being a human is okay. And then to be
Right.
okay with it being okay.
And I
Right.
think
Well,
I think part of the human experience, this is my perception, also includes feeling suicidal. I don't know about either of you, but in my life, I have felt like maybe not planning out my suicide, but like my life would just be so much easier if I wasn't alive. And then I've also thought, so would other people's lives. Like I'm such a downer to this person who thinks I'm so terrible that if I just killed myself, like wouldn't everything just be easier for everybody else?
I
I
think
have
just
definitely experienced that.
so I mean, I don't know if I've necessarily experienced it that way, but I've
Okay.
definitely experienced it in the way where if I've been in a low point,
Yeah.
where kind of that nihilist thinking, where
Yeah.
it's like, well, what's this all for?
Yeah.
What am I doing? Like, you know, you're on this endless wheel and it's spinning, and sometimes you feel like, you know, 2 steps forward, 8 steps back, and you get into these mindsets where, or at least I have in the past, where it's like, wouldn't it just be easier if there was nothing? Wouldn't it just be easier if everything just stopped? So it's not like a conscious, I want to plan my exit,
Right.
but it's more just the overthinking the idea that, God, I just wish I could stop everything. I wish that. So
Also, there's this piece inside of us. So I hired a coach at one point. I spent $20,000 to spend 3 hours with him. And part of his coaching, he said right off the bat, he's like, when we dig into this, there's going to be a piece of you that goes to death. And I was like, no, there's not. That's not who I am. And he was like, oh, okay. And so we continued our journey, and he kind of was like, what's your biggest fear? And then he makes you dig into that fear. So what's your biggest fear? I don't know, losing everything. Okay, and what's the consequence of that? Nobody likes me. Okay, and if nobody likes you, what's the consequence of that? Well, then I'm alone in this world. Okay, and if you're alone in this world, what's the worst that happens? And he just kept pushing and pushing and pushing. And he said, I'm trying to get you to that point. And all of a sudden I was like, then why am I fucking here? And all of a sudden I was like, oh, holy shit. And he's like, and now you've hit where I want you to hit. So because you're not going to kill yourself because you just spent $20,000 with me as a perfect example of not doing it, that is the worst case. You're going to commit suicide. So if everything above that is not suicide, why don't we look at it like it's not so bad? And I was just
yeah.
like, holy shit. So he's like, look at your worst fear and dig as far into it as you can to get to the point where that thought surfaces for you only for a reason of awareness, only for the moment so that you can look at yourself and say, holy shit, I don't even need to be there. Especially someone who didn't think that they would ever say something like that all of a sudden spits it out. Like he was poking and I was getting pissed off. And finally I got pissed off to the point where I said it. And then I was like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Like the only time I've ever had thoughts like that was high school, as being bullied, like those types of things. I haven't had those thoughts as an adult. And I want to say that was probably 5 years ago. And I was just,
Consciously.
yeah, not consciously, yes. And I just had this moment of, wow, like, wow, how quickly people can get here because it probably only took him 15 minutes to get me to that place.
Well, it's interesting because you just totally triggered something for me that happened to me in therapy recently. So I went back into therapy. I saw a therapist 30 years ago when I, didn't know what I wanted to do. Do I go to college? Do I not go to college? What do I want to do? And having nothing to do whatsoever with anything that's happening in my life now, or my father, or any of those things. So now I just gifted myself a few years ago finding a therapist. It's been one of the most beautiful things that I have given to myself. I adore this woman. What she has done for me is on a level all unto itself, what she has helped me to do. And one of the things that she said to me recently was, we were trying to drill down to why I have this hyper vigilant personality type. Like I'm the person. So I'm number one, I'm a mom. I was an only child. I lost my dad really young. It was my mom and me. Why am I always my entire life running around everybody like, you okay? Are you okay? Are you good? Everybody okay? What do you need? How can I help? That's my MO. That's how I show up in the world. My love language is, let me do your laundry. Let me cook for you. Let me be there and show up for you. Let me take care of you. All those things, to the point where I'm fucking exhausted. I'm just like mentally, like, I just want it to stop. And so she was asking me those same questions. She's drilling down and she's like, okay, well, let's figure out why that is. And to just jump right to why it was, I was a 10-year-old kid and I went to bed and my dad was there. And I woke up in the morning and my dad wasn't there anymore. And I have been terrified my entire life of losing the people that I love. So I always need to be checking in on everybody, always need to be making sure that everybody is good and stable and has what they need. And it was like all of a sudden this hyper vigilant side of myself was just born, and it's been there ever since. And now my work, part of the work that I do on myself, is creating a ton of boundaries, because I say yes to everything. And when you say yes to everything for everybody else, you're
Saying
inadvertently
no to
saying no
everything
to
for
your
yourself.
exactly. So I have that whole thing that I'm working on, and then this other part of me that's like, oh shit, that's why I am the way that I am. Okay, so how do I somehow manage this other side of myself that was born out of this fear of losing everything, or losing it's my people. That's
Yeah.
what gets to me. So I hear what you're saying.
We try to avoid
Totally
pain at all costs,
yeah.
essentially.
Yeah, we
And
do.
it's so
And
cool because even in this conversation, as you're saying it, I've been really digging into the IFS, which is the internal family systems.
yes.
And for me, as I'm hearing you say that, like my brain is like, oh my goodness, you need to go in and talk to that protector and ask her to move so that you can talk to the person she's protecting. And
Mm-hmm.
then pull that person back out and ask her what she'd prefer to do than what she's currently doing. Because what I found with most of my protectors and reading these books is that most of my protectors are in a job they didn't want to be in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So when I go in and talk to them, first of all, I ask them to move out of the way so I can find out what the real problem is. And then I invite them back so I can ask them what would they prefer to be doing
Mhm.
outside of this.
Mhm.
And almost every one of my protectors' answers so far has been, I just want to help. That's how come I did what I did in the first place, because I just want to help. And there's like this core piece of most of us that is, I just want to help.
Definitely. Definitely. The problem is most people don't know how.
Right.
Yes.
Exactly, because we
Well, and
haven't
we have to help
necessarily
ourselves.
been taught.
That's the thing. We have to help ourselves, and we don't often A, know that we need to help ourselves, or B,
How to
what the
do
hell
it.
we need to do it. Right.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
That's the whole problem.
Yes.
Right. Exactly. And I think a lot of that is that we just are so damn hard on ourselves. We just set these expectations that are ridiculous.
Yep.
And we don't allow ourselves to be fallible. We don't allow ourselves to ask for
Make
help. We don't
mistakes.
allow ourselves to make mistakes. And I'll tell you, once I cut all that bullshit out of my life, in as much as you can, because some
Yep.
things, like you said, you're like, damn, I'm being, I'm people pleasing right now, and I don't realize I'm people pleasing. We do these things unconsciously sometimes, but
Yeah.
for the majority of my life now, in these last most recent years, I the work that I've done creating boundaries, and picking and choosing where I put myself, where I spend my time, where I put my energy, what I can tell you that has done has made me such a better version of myself. It's made me a better wife. It's made me a better mom. It's made me a better daughter. It's made me a better friend. And this is not to say that I'm running around telling everybody like, sorry, can't help, not going to be there for you. It's not that. It's saying, I don't have the capacity for this right now. I will be there when I do, but I don't right now. And it's just these simple little things that we can do for our own benefit that we don't realize we have the power to do, that make all the difference in the world.
I
Well,
think this is such a perfect place to end.
It's not. It's
You
not.
you have more. Finally, okay, tell us.
Let's
Okay,
keep going.
because
Keep
I
going.
feel like we like to provide like actionable steps, right? So what keeps coming up while you all are talking is like, oh, I'm like, yep, yep, yep. And I've talked about this lots. So yoga literally is the answer to everything. Okay, I'm just kidding. But the idea is like,
I believe it.
is that yoga is so much more than literally the practice, right? So if you ever want to, I'd love to invite you to come and check out some of my offerings if you ever want to collab on something, because I think this perspective takes it just a little bit deeper. So two things that I know, being a space holder of trauma-informed teachings, is that I totally lost my line of thinking right in that moment. Can you believe it? Like, wait, I got this. I got to tell you guys about it. And then I lost it. No, I got it back. I got it back because I addressed it. Okay. Is the idea, and I don't know how this is going to land for you, but there's a thought now that we need more than talk therapy. In order to move through all that's going on, we need more than talk therapy, and that is somatic movement, right? The idea of moving emotions throughout our body, because the idea is that that is really what we're avoiding overall. So I like to put that out there, because if people continue to go through therapy, and it can be very incredibly enlightening, very helpful, very insightful, but then we just keep going. And there's just this block that we can't seem to get over. And I've been told that's the physical body and the language of holding on to emotion.
I can't believe that you're bringing this up. It's
Okay.
like so serendipitous to me that you're bringing this up.
Okay.
So one of the things, you can still hear me okay, right?
Yeah, it just
Oh,
took
okay.
a minute, but we're good.
Yeah, I just got a weird microphone thing. So one of the things that I have wanted to do for a very long time, that I started doing last summer and continue to do now, is, so I'm a big movement person, big runner, yoga, snowboarding, all the things, love to lift weights. I love to be physical. And it's a very, very big part of my personal practice, as is meditation, as is yoga, as it, like those are my non-negotiables. And the benefits, and I do a lot of that in group settings where you're just fitnessing with other people, and there's accountability and all those great attributes of just being in a group. So I started thinking about things in terms of mental health and wellness, and how so often, and I'm sure you both know this and realize this, that like we focus so much on like physical wellness, keep your body healthy, keep watch your nutrition, and make sure you're hydrated, and we make sure your body is fit, and we neglect our mind. But we forget that those two things go hand in hand. Like you can't have one without the other. So based on that, I decided to start something in my area, in the Boston area here, and I'm thrilled that it's taken off. I created a movement called the Walk Talk Collective, because when you think about movement and you think about something that can be applicable to anybody, okay, walking is something that, number one, most people in most cases can do at their own pace.
Yeah.
And you can talk while you're doing that.
Yeah.
So let's create a place, let's create a community where people are encouraged to show up, to move their bodies, to flex their brains. It's a safe space where you can unload all the shit that's in your head, and talk about it in a way that you can make something from it, process it, move through it, and harness those endorphins and all of the positive attributes of physical movement. So that program has been going on. I started it in my hometown here, just north of Boston, and now our local North Shore of Boston YMCA has integrated that into their program. And my goal is to be, to take over the world with the Walk Talk Collective, and have different branches all over the country, so that we can do exactly what you're saying, which is to finally marry those two things, because there's an undeniable connection that is, I think, the secret sauce to getting us to that place of total balance.
I love that. I'm so glad. I was like, I don't know. Sometimes I hear like, no, therapy is the answer. It's like, yeah, therapy with our physical body too. Just throwing that out there. And then what this brings is like, I always go back to yoga, and one of the like kind of Bibles of yoga is called the Sutras. And within the Sutras, there's a section, and it talks about our causes of suffering, or the reasons why we suffer, or our obstacles to happiness. And there's 5 of them. And I hope that our audience is like knows them now, but like maybe not. Repetition is key. So one of the first reasons that we suffer is because we're ignorant. And the idea is like ignorant, not as a bad word, but like not knowing. And the not knowing is like related to who we truly are. And within yoga, the idea, there's no dude in the sky. There's like God as an energy, right? And we're all part of it. And so if you don't know who you truly are, which is part of God, then you will misidentify. And who do you misidentify as? The ego. The ego we were talking about, the I, the selfish. And so when we misidentify it with ego, the problem is, and I always heard about yoga as science. So the ego is your nervous system. And what we know about the nervous system is that it's attached to feeling good, and it's averse to feeling bad. That was really important in caveman days because it taught us how to stay alive. But when we're in the ego and we have attachment and we have aversion, then we also have, and this is where the coach was leading Merity, is we have fear of death.
Mhm.
And so we suffer for these 5 reasons, but the sutras tell us how to remember, like how to overcome all of it. And it's to remember who you are. And who you are is awesome. And who you are is real. And who you
And a
are
part of God.
suffers. And who you are, is not fat, stupid, and ugly, because that's ego. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
just wanted to come back to that idea because we talked about this and like being section 28, when you come in because you've attempted suicide and then you get arrested and you're taken to a psych ward. A lot of the time cops don't just arrest everybody who tries to commit suicide. Cops arrest people that, I mean, it depends because not everything is perfect, but a lot of the time is like if my partner, and when I say is in a down, I mean depressed, in the depression, and he doesn't want to live anymore. And then he attempts to relieve his own life from this world in a place where, trust me, in the opposite, he doesn't want to die. He talks about wanting to live as long as he can. So when he's down in that place, then he probably needs some psychiatric support to get him out of that place. Maybe he hasn't been taking his meds. And then on top of it, we have there's 3 main things that we need to be doing to take care of our mental health, regardless of if we have illness or not. And that's to make sure you're sleeping adequately, to make sure that you're exercising, and to make sure that you're eating healthy so that you are taking care of the base of the pyramid, our foundation of health, of taking care of all those things, and then medicated if we need that additional support. So,
And I find it so interesting too, because I've seen a lot of it recently because I haven't spent my whole life eating properly and doing all the things properly. Yeah, I've gone to the gym for 20 plus years, but you can't outwork a bad diet. I've been told it a million
No.
times. And what I didn't realize until I really started focusing on eating better, and I'm far from perfect, that's not what I'm saying. But since I started eating better, I have more mental clarity. I have less depression. My seasonal afflictive disorder is nowhere near as overpowering. My PMDD, like all these things that you get diagnosed with, I obviously have the seasonal afflictive. So my doctor said you have SADS. It is what it is. So October to May, I'm a little more depressed, sad. There's things that I can do to make it so I'm not like that. One, vitamin D. So tanning. My doctor is like, I don't care what you do, you need to tan. We need vitamin D. Second, you need to eat food, and you need to eat good foods, because when
Well,
you're
that's the
eating
key.
crap foods and processed foods, you're putting that shit into your brain and your brain doesn't like it. Now you're
No.
feeling cloudy, you're feeling lazy, lethargic. We have 2 brains in our body. We have one in our stomach and one in our head. And the one in your stomach tells the one in your head how to feel. So food is such an important part. And Lynn is saying exercise. That could be walking, you guys. It could be the
Absolutely.
simplest
yeah.
movement, but movement is required. We need these things in order to function. The basic needs need to be met so that I'm not stressed about those things, so I can worry about the less important things, so I can stress about them instead.
Right. Well, I mean, it's what you're both saying is it's so relevant. Like it's the base of everything. It's the whole picture. It's the thinking about what we need, giving ourselves what we need, prioritizing our needs. All of those things are, the physical part, the mental part, the emotional part. It's all interconnected. And like you said, you you can spend 50 hours a week in the gym, but the gym is 20% of the solution.
Yeah.
80% of it is how you feed your body, what you feed your mind with, whether or not you're sleeping, whether or not your stress levels are, off the charts. It's a total package. And you think of it, look, I think of it in terms of like a car. I mean, I basically dumb it down for myself to a point like if I don't put gas in a car,
Yeah.
the appropriate kind of gas in a car, I can't just pour anything in the tank. It's not going to work. I have to put the right thing in the right place in the right way at the right time to optimize this
I
thing that
love
I'm
that you
trying to keep going.
I love that you said that because it makes me think this one time I put I put gas into a diesel engine.
Oh God.
And it was not like intentional by any means. It was one of those things where the guy pulled up. I was working at a gas station. The guy pulled up and said, fill it up. And I was like, gas or diesel? And he said, yes. I thought he said gas. So I
Oops.
put gas in. And then he's like, well, shit, because you can still drive a diesel on gas. You cannot drive a gas on diesel.
No, you can't.
So essentially, if you guys are picturing what Lisa just said, you are putting diesel into a gas engine, which is not going to last very long, or
No.
you're putting gas in a diesel engine and it's still not going to last very long. So you're putting shit into a system and it's not going to run the way it's supposed to unless it's got what it needs.
Exactly. Exactly. Exactly.
So,
This
And I
is,
think that's the whole point.
yeah,
mhm.
this is awesome. And I appreciate
Yes.
what you're doing in the world. So you're part of the Trevor Project, which is a place for minorities, which is not just race, can go to speak when they need some support. I know that you have created the Help Hub. You're
That's
a
right.
part
Yep.
of the Samaritan, and
That's right.
you are also a storyteller. This is the one I'm not grabbing onto, the Mental Health Institute.
It's actually the National Alliance of Mental Illness.
There we go.
It's called NAMI. And they're a grassroots mental health organization. They're all over the country. They provide lots of services and support and education for all sorts of mental health challenges. It's not just suicide related. It's
Amazing.
all sorts of mental health challenges. And
Amazing.
so I work with them as a storyteller. So I go around sharing in my home state of Massachusetts. I go around and I share my lived experience as a survivor and kind of what it looks like for me. We do a lot with first responders. We do a lot with civic organizations where we go in and we kind of have a Q&A and a good, real, like open, honest back and forth conversation just to give people different context.
Yeah, I love that. And the podcast that you are doing, what is it
Mhm.
called?
So it's called The Survivors, and I joined forces with this amazing fireball of a human. Her name is Gretchen Shozer, and I think I
Okay.
told you before we started going live that Gretchen already has a crazy successful podcast, mental health podcast called Shit That Goes On in Our Heads that she has done for the last couple of years with a co-host. And I was a guest. I was invited to be a guest on her podcast. And sometimes in this world of being guests on podcasts, you have to have like maybe a 10 or 15-minute pre-call just to make sure everybody's in alignment with what they're going to talk about. And some podcasts have it, some don't. Her podcast had it. So she and I chatted, should have been 10 or 15 minutes. It was almost 3 hours. And we just dug deep into each other's experiences and our history and our stories. And those feelings when you just automatically connect with somebody,
Yeah.
you feel like they've been in your life for 27 years, and how is it that we haven't spent every day together for
Yes.
20 years? That was the way that it was with the two of us. And when we got off that call, we said, okay, we need another call because we need to do something together. We didn't know what it was. And the podcast The Survivors was born from that because Gretchen is an attempt survivor.
Right.
I'm a multiple suicide loss survivor. We're both advocates. I'm on the crisis lifelines. And we didn't know of, had never been able to find another podcast that really brought those two perspectives into the same place to talk about those things in such an open and transparent and mainstream kind of way, just to help bust apart the stigma. And so we just decided to start this podcast. And right now we're really it's the two of us having conversations.
Yeah.
As we continue on and move through the season and into next, we're going to bring people on here and there, but primarily they're just conversations that we're having about our own experiences. And it's been just such a beautiful experience to create this community. It's already starting to catch fire. We're getting so much beautiful feedback just about the perspective we're bringing into the world. So we're just really motivated to keep the conversation going, and more than anything, to create a community for this. It's a minority, although it's weird to say it's a minority because when you look at the numbers of it, there are over 92 million people on this planet every year who are in some way touched by suicide.
Affected.
Yeah. Whether you know someone or you've lost someone, or, It's that ripple effect. And so there's a huge community out there, and we would love to be a hub for that community where people can find what they need to keep moving forward. So that's our podcast.
Aw, this is awesome. Thank you so much for just doing your dharma.
No, thank you. Thank you. I'm trying, that's for sure. And
Yeah.
thank you both for doing the same thing, for uplifting, those of us who are trying to do things to help, make a positive impact in the world. So
Right.
appreciate you both.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Thanks
And
for
thank you
having
guys
me.
for listening again, and we will see you guys again in about 2 weeks.
Thank you for joining us on this spirited journey today.
We hope you enjoyed diving into the world of self-improvement with us. Two sisters who found their own unique paths.
Remember, life is a tapestry of experiences, and it's how we embrace them that makes all the difference.
So whether you're on your yoga mat, exploring mindfulness, or simply navigating life's twists and turns, always keep that spirit and sass alive.
We are Colin and Nerdy Lockoff, and we're here to remind you that happiness and abundance are within reach.
Stay connected with us on social media and keep those questions and stories coming. We love hearing from you.
Until next time, beautiful souls, keep doing the work, keep sharing your experiences, and keep living a life that's authentically you.
And never forget to add a little extra sass to your day.
Spirit and sass, always.